Captain Sophia Hartley stood in the command center of the Retribution, staring at the holo display in front of her. The swirling map of the galaxy was a grim reminder of humanity's shrinking territory. The once mighty fleets of the United Earth Alliance had been reduced to a scattered collection of ships, most of which had been destroyed in the ongoing war with the Xanthari. The Retribution was humanity's last hope, an ancient behemoth from a time long before the Xanthari invasion. Its once proud, polished hull now showed signs of years of disrepair, its once impressive engines humming weakly as if reluctant to wake from their long slumber. It was a relic of an era when human spacefaring technology was cutting edge, but now, it was nothing more than a reminder of what humanity had lost. The crew was a mix of veterans and technicians, each one older than the next, their faces marked by the years and battles fought. They weren't the young, eager soldiers who had once manned the latest warships. No, they were the remnants, the survivors of a generation that had seen humanity at its peak and now watched as it crumbled under the alien onslaught. "Captain, the Xanthari fleet is in position." Lieutenant Farley's voice cut through her thoughts. He was young, but even he had seen enough destruction to have lost his youthful idealism. The map on the display flickered, showing a formation of enemy ships surrounding the human colony of Dulfar 7, a vital outpost on the edge of human space. It was a minor colony by the standards of the Xanthari, but it was important for humanity's remaining supply lines. "They'll attack within the hour," Farley continued, "and with the fleet in shambles, we're all that stands between them and total destruction. It's the Retribution or nothing now." Sophia glanced down at the worn control panel in front of her. The ship's systems flickered in an almost mocking fashion, struggling to stay online. The Xanthari had no idea what they were about to face. To them, the Retribution was a joke, a rusted wreck, a warship of the past with no place in the future. Their sensors would surely scan it and dismiss it as a relic, just like everyone else had. Even many of the human fleet commanders considered it obsolete, something to be abandoned or left in a museum. But Sophia knew the truth. Beneath the rust, the grime, and the outdated technology, there was still something in the Retribution that no enemy could measure or predict: human resolve. "Ready the crew, Lieutenant," Sophia ordered, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "Tell them to prepare for a fight they've never seen before." Farley nodded, his expression grim but resolute. He left the bridge, and Sophia turned her attention back to the holographic display. The Xanthari fleet, sleek and menacing, loomed on the edge of the system, waiting to make their move. They didn't know it yet, but today would be the day they learned what humanity could do when pushed to the brink. As the countdown began, Sophia couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. This was it. The Retribution might be old, its systems outdated, its weapons less advanced than the Xanthari's. But the humans aboard her had something the Xanthari lacked: the fire of a species that had survived against all odds, again and again. The warship might have been a joke to the rest of the galaxy, but it was a joke the Xanthari were about to learn the hard way. She wasn't sure if it would be enough to turn the tide. But if it was the last thing she did, she was going to make sure the Retribution made one hell of a punchline. "Captain," a voice crackled through the comms. It was Commander Yates, one of the senior officers on board. "We've got power to the main engines. Shields are at 35% and climbing. Weapon systems are online. We're ready." Sophia felt a tightness in her chest. 35% was barely enough to hold off the Xanthari's opening salvo, but it was a start. She gave a nod, steeling herself for the inevitable. "Deploy all fighters," she ordered, "and set course for the enemy flagship. We may be outgunned, but we're not going down without a fight." With a deep breath, she turned to the view screen. The Xanthari ships were already aligning for their first strike, their massive cannons charging, their advanced targeting systems locking onto their target. The moment was near. The Retribution was nothing more than a shadow of what it had once been. But as the countdown to battle began, Sophia Hartley could feel it. The Retribution wasn't just a warship. It was humanity's last defiant roar. and it was about to make its mark. The bridge of the Retribution hummed with the sound of old machinery, a constant reminder of the ship's age. As the crew moved into their positions, the atmosphere was tense but determined. Captain Hartley took her seat in the command chair, her hand steady despite the weight of the responsibility pressing down on her. The crew was ready. Now it was just a matter of whether the ship was. All fighters deployed, Farley reported, his voice as calm as he could muster under the circumstances. Shield strength is holding steady at 35%. We're ready to engage. Sophia nodded, her eyes fixed on the massive Xanthuri fleet ahead. Their ships were sleek, practically gliding through space, their weapon systems glowing with energy. They were the epitome of alien technological superiority, advanced beyond anything humanity had ever developed. And yet, there was the Retribution, a hulking relic from a past era, floating in the midst of the impending storm. A new voice crackled over the comms. It was Yates again, sounding slightly less composed this time. "Captain, we're picking up Xanthuri communications. They're laughing, Captain. They're mocking us." Sophia didn't need to hear more. The Xanthuri were always overconfident, but this was different. They thought the Retribution was nothing more than a decaying hulk, incapable of defending itself, let alone winning a battle. They underestimated the strength of humanity's resolve, and that was about to cost them. "Let them laugh," she replied, her voice cold and controlled. "When they stop laughing, we'll still be here." The ship's engines roared to life, sluggish at first, but steadily gaining power. The sounds of ancient systems groaning and whirring filled the air. But there was a certain rhythm to it, a familiarity. The ship was old, yes, but it had been built for war. And wars, no matter how advanced the technology, always had a way of showing that brute strength and human ingenuity could often overcome the odds. The Xanthuri fleet made the first move, as expected. A massive energy beam shot from the lead Xanthuri battleship, its blue-white light blazing toward the Retribution. It moved faster than the human sensors could process, but the shields held firm, just barely. The ship rocked violently, the impact sending a tremor through the entire vessel. "Shields at 25%, Yates shouted, the strain evident in his voice. "Hull integrity holding steady, but we can't take another hit like that." "Give them everything we've got," Sophia ordered without hesitation. "Fire main cannons, all batteries. Target their lead ship." The crew worked in a coordinated frenzy, hitting buttons and pulling levers that had long been forgotten in the age of more modern ships. The controls were primitive by today's standards, but the crew's experience with the Retribution was unparalleled. They knew this ship inside and out, its quirks, its limits, its potential. The ancient cannons, which had been thought useless for years, roared to life with surprising force. The first shot missed, but the second found its target, slamming into the lead Xanthuri battleship's shield with a resounding boom. The Xanthuri flagship shook as the energy blast hit, sending ripples through its hull. A brief flicker of panic was visible among the alien crew, but it was quickly suppressed. They underestimated the humans, but that one hit had been enough to remind them that the Retribution was far from helpless. "Direct hit, Captain," Farley called out, a trace of excitement in his voice. "They're taking damage. The shields are weakening." Sophia's eyes narrowed. That was the moment. The Xanthuri didn't think the Retribution could do any real damage, but they had just seen the first proof that this old warship still had teeth. The crew, for the first time in a long while, felt something they hadn't felt in months. Hope. "Keep pressing them," she commanded. "Don't let up. We've only got one chance to make them believe we're not just a joke." The Xanthuri responded quickly, launching a volley of energy blasts back at the Retribution. The ship's hull groaned under the pressure as the shields flared to absorb the impact. A few sections of the ship were damaged, but the crew worked quickly to stabilize the systems. "Shields at 15%, Yates warned. "We're starting to bleed power, Captain." "We need to make this count," Sophia said, her voice calm but edged with urgency. "Target their engines. Take out their power, and they're done. With precise coordination, the human gunners fired a concentrated barrage at the Zinthari flagship's engine core. The shots found their mark, and the alien ship's shields flared wildly. The Zinthari flagship staggered, slowing down as its power systems flickered. For a moment, the Zinthari didn't move. They were stunned. They had underestimated the human resolve, the power of the retribution. But that moment of hesitation would be short-lived. The Zinthari would respond with fury. But for the first time since the battle began, the retribution had made its mark. Sophia stood tall, her gaze locked on the Zinthari fleet, as the energy from the ship's cannons filled the void around them. We may be the underdogs, but we're not out of this yet. Not by a long shot. The Zinthari flagship staggered as its shields flickered, struggling to recover from the unexpected barrage. The silence that followed felt like a long breath held in the void of space. For a brief moment, the alien fleet hesitated, unsure how to respond to the unexpected threat. They had expected the human ship to be a slow, clumsy target, easy to dispatch. Instead, they were faced with a ship that had teeth that were now sinking deep into their defenses. Sophia Hartley didn't waste the opportunity. Her eyes narrowed as she assessed the battlefield. The retribution had only one chance to turn the tide in this fight, and the crew knew it. There was no turning back now. Fire again, concentrated blast, right at their engines, she ordered, her voice sharp with command. The crew responded in sync, hands flying across consoles as the gunners targeted the flagship once more. The ship's ancient weapons hummed to life, their familiar roar filling the air. The first salvo hit its mark, a direct hit to the Zinthari flagship's engines. The damage was significant, but not enough to cripple the alien ship entirely. "Captain, the Zinthari are regrouping," Lieutenant Farley reported. "They've begun to move into formation. They're preparing a counterattack." Sophia gripped the armrests of her chair, her mind racing. The retribution was outgunned, its shields rapidly weakening. But she could sense something, an old, almost forgotten rhythm inside the ship. Something the retribution had been built for, back in the days before the Zinthari's rise to power. There was a reason humanity had once built ships like this, and it wasn't just for brute force. It was for strategy, for adaptability. "Bring up the old combat protocols," Sophia said suddenly, her eyes lighting up with realization. "The ones from the pre-Zinthari War. The ones we used against the first alien incursions." There was a brief pause as the crew processed her words. Then, Yates's voice crackled over the comms. "Understood, Captain. Activating legacy combat settings now." The system powered up with a nostalgic whine. The ancient AI that controlled the retribution had been all but forgotten in the years of disrepair, but it had never fully shut down. Now, it began analyzing the data with startling efficiency. Its calculations, though based on outdated algorithms, had a unique edge that the modern Zinthari intelligence systems couldn't predict. The AI had learned, over centuries of silence, how to adapt to evolving threats. Sophia's heart raced as the new systems kicked in. "Here we go," she muttered. "Let's see what you've got, old girl." The weapons systems suddenly surged with energy. The cannons that had once seemed unreliable roared to life, their firepower now calibrated for precision. The ship's ancient AI had figured out the Zinthari's attack patterns in a way that no modern system could. It used the data from previous skirmishes, combined with an uncanny ability to predict the aliens' moves, and adjusted the retribution's fire accordingly. The Zinthari fleet was advancing, expecting another easy strike, but they weren't prepared for the precision of the human counters. In rapid succession, the retribution's weapons fired, hitting key points of the Zinthari ships with startling accuracy. Energy blasts tore into the vulnerable points of the alien ships, engines, weapons pods, and even critical communication systems. The Zinthari fleet began to stagger, their once perfect formations crumbling under the onslaught. Direct hits on two of their cruisers, Farley reported, his voice filled with disbelief. They're not responding. Their communications are down. The Zinthari flagship, still reeling from the previous barrage, tried to retaliate, launching several plasma torpedoes in a desperate attempt to cripple the Retribution. But the human crew was ready. With quick thinking, they diverted power to the ship's aging, but still functional, shield generators. The incoming fire bounced harmlessly off the ship's battered exterior, while the Retribution pressed forward. "Shields at 15%, Captain," Yates reported, his voice trained but steady. "Hull integrity holding. But we're running out of time." Sophia didn't flinch. She could feel the pressure building, but there was no doubt in her mind. They had the Zinthari on the ropes. "Keep firing," she ordered. "This is our chance. If we can take down their command ship, the rest will fall." The Retribution's AI had already begun to track the Zinthari flagship's weak points, targeting its power core. The ship, though old, was operating on a level no one expected. The crew worked as one, guided by instinct and centuries of combat experience, executing maneuvers that even the Zinthari hadn't anticipated. They were no longer the joke of the battlefield. They were the hunters, and the Zinthari were the prey. The energy blasts from the Retribution rained down on the Zinthari flagship, each hit chipping away at its defenses. As the flagship's shields collapsed under the sustained fire, its hull began to show visible fractures. The Zinthari flagship staggered again, struggling to maintain its position in the fight. "We've got them," Farley muttered under his breath. "We've actually got them." Sophia's lips curled into a tight smile. "Don't celebrate yet. We finish this, or we finish nothing." The battle was far from over. But as the Retribution tore into the Zinthari fleet, it became clear the old warship had just begun to show the full extent of its power, and humanity had shown the galaxy that no ship, no matter how ancient, was ever truly obsolete. The Zinthari flagship was in full retreat now, its hull damaged beyond repair. The alien ships were disoriented, their flawless coordination slipping as their commanders struggled to regain control. What had begun as a slaughter for the Zinthari now threatened to become their greatest failure. The shift in the battle was undeniable. The Retribution, battered and old, was still standing. And so was the crew, unyielding in the face of impossible odds. "Captain, we're receiving reports from the fleet. The Zinthari are retreating," Lieutenant Farley said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "They're pulling back. Their formations are disbanding." Sophia stood tall at the command chair, her gaze fixed on the tactical display. The Zinthari forces, once a near unbeatable foe, were faltering. Their ships, designed for dominance, were now taking fire from all sides. The Retribution had made a mockery of their superior technology. The crew had come together in a way that was impossible to replicate in a more modern, highly trained force. There was no fancy automation, no flashy new technology, just the sheer, unrelenting will of a human crew that refused to back down. They were veterans of wars, survivors of disasters, and now they were the reason humanity still had a chance. "Sir, we've got a direct hit on the command cruiser," Yates called out from his console. "It's losing power. Their shields are down to 20%. Sophia's pulse quickened. The Zinthari were not only retreating, they were on the verge of complete collapse. This was humanity's moment to strike the final blow. They had one shot at ending this battle and sending the Zinthari a message that they could not ignore. A message that no matter how many times humanity was knocked down, they would always rise again. "All ships, full power to the weapons," Sophia barked, her voice a sharp command that cut through the tension. "Target their engines and communications. Disable them entirely. This fight ends today." The crew surged into action, their movements like clockwork, honed over years of experience. The AI, once dormant, now worked in tandem with the crew, predicting the Zinthari's evasive maneuvers before they could even make them. The battle was no longer a desperate defense. It had become a calculated and aggressive offensive, with the Retribution leading the charge. The ancient warship fired again, its cannons shaking with the force of each blast. One by one, Syntheri ships began to fall, their engines exploding as the human fire tore into their vulnerable points. The Syntheri had always relied on superior firepower and technology to win, but it was humanity's adaptability and resilience that were proving to be their undoing. Sophia watched in silence as their ship's cannon sent another blast toward a Syntheri destroyer, its shields failing just in time for the hit to land squarely in its core. The destroyer erupted into a massive fireball, sending debris scattering across the battlefield. "Another one down," Farley announced. "The Syntheri are beginning to scatter. They're retreating at full speed." But even as the Syntheri fleet faltered, Sophia could feel the weight of what they had accomplished. This wasn't just about destroying enemy ships. It was about proving something far greater. They had shown the galaxy that humanity wasn't finished, that they could take on the most advanced alien empire in existence and still emerge victorious. In a universe that had written them off as weak, this battle was a defiant declaration. "They didn't expect us to fight back this hard," Yates said quietly, his fingers still dancing over the controls as he monitored the last few Syntheri ships fleeing into the distance. "They thought we were done. They thought we were obsolete." Sophia nodded, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. "They underestimated us, and that's a mistake they'll never make again." The bridge was filled with a rare sense of triumph as the final Syntheri ships limped away, their fleet in shambles. The Retribution, the ship that no one believed could ever be effective again, had single-handedly turned the tide of a war that had seemed lost. But as Sophia looked out at the wreckage of the Syntheri fleet, she knew this victory wasn't just about one ship. It was about the will to fight, to survive, to adapt. Humanity might not have the most advanced technology, but they had something the Syntheri could never replicate: the strength of the human spirit. And that was why they had won. Sophia's voice was calm but resolute as she spoke to her crew. "Well done, everyone. The Syntheri know we're not the easy target they thought we were, but this battle is only the beginning. We've just shown them what happens when you push humanity too far." The aftermath of the battle was eerily quiet. The remnants of the Syntheri fleet were scattered across the battlefield, drifting like broken husks in the void. The once pristine ships of the alien empire were now nothing more than debris, their power cores ruptured, their weapons systems disabled. Victory was theirs, for now. But as Sophia Hartley stood on the bridge of the Retribution, she couldn't shake the sense of unease that lingered in the air. The crew had celebrated briefly when the final Syntheri ship fled, but now, as the ship floated among the wreckage, the gravity of what they had just done began to settle in. "Captain," Farley said, breaking the silence, "we've completed our sweep. The Syntheri fleet is in full retreat, but we've got a problem." Sophia turned toward him, her brow furrowed. "What kind of problem?" Farley hesitated for a moment before replying. "The Retribution is damaged more than we realized. The power systems are holding, but we've lost several of the secondary engines. Shields are operating at less than 20%. It won't take much for the Syntheri to regroup and finish us off if we don't get to a repair station soon." Sophia exhaled slowly. She had expected losses, of course. No battle was won without cost. But the reality of it now weighed heavy on her shoulders. The ship that had been their savior, the one they'd relied on to win this impossible fight, was hanging together by a thread. "We'll make it work," Sophia replied, trying to mask the concern in her voice. "Get a status report from engineering. Let me know if we have any chance of getting those engines back online." "Aye, Captain," Farley said, nodding and turning back to his console. As he worked, Sophia took a moment to look around the bridge, at the worn faces of her crew. They were exhausted, physically, mentally, emotionally. The battle had taken everything they had, but now, with the immediate threat of the Syntheri fleet retreating, it was clear that survival was no guarantee. The Retribution was a relic. It had proven its worth in battle, but its age was beginning to show. The crew had put everything into this victory, but now they had to consider the price of their success. "Captain," Yates called from his station, his voice tense. "There's a message coming through. It's from the High Command. They want to speak with you." Sophia's stomach tightened. The High Command had no reason to contact her, unless there was something serious. They had all but abandoned this corner of the galaxy to its fate, focusing on more strategic areas in the war. She could already guess what the message might be. "Patch it through," she said, her voice unwavering. The screen flickered, and a stern-faced officer appeared, his uniform pristine even through the flickering static. His eyes, however, were cold and calculating, like someone who had seen the tides of war shift and knew better than to celebrate premature victories. "Captain Hartley," the officer began, his tone curt, "we've been monitoring your actions. The destruction of the Zinthuri fleet was impressive, but don't think for a second that it changes the larger picture. We have limited resources, and the Retribution's outdated status means it can't be counted on for sustained operations. We're not interested in salvaging relics. We need results." Sophia's heart pounded in her chest. She knew what was coming. "You're ordering us to abandon this area," she said flatly. "You've seen what the Retribution is capable of. We just took down an entire Zinthuri fleet. This ship may be old, but it's still a weapon. We're not out of this yet." The officer's gaze hardened, his jaw tight. "We're not gambling the future of humanity on a single ship with questionable reliability. We need you to fall back. Let the Zinthuri regroup, and we'll send reinforcements once we're able to secure other fronts." Sophia clenched her fists, fury rising within her. She had known this moment was coming. The moment when humanity's leaders would put strategy over the lives of those who had bled for their survival. But to hear it in such cold terms stung more than she had expected. "We'll be staying in position," she replied, her voice steely. "If you want us to fall back, you'll have to order us to do so. We just took down their fleet. You think they'll just let us leave? We're not finished yet." The officer's expression faltered, a flicker of something, perhaps doubt, crossing his face. But it quickly vanished, replaced with the hard resolve of someone who had made their decision. "Do what you will, Captain," he said, his tone clipped, "but don't expect any support. You're on your own." The transmission cut off. The bridge fell silent again, the weight of the conversation hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Sophia's mind raced. The Zinthuri were still out there. They had retreated, yes, but they weren't defeated. And if they returned, the Retribution, damaged as it was, would be the only force standing between them and the human colonies. "I won't abandon our people," she muttered, almost to herself. Farley turned back to her. "Captain, if we stay here, we'll be vulnerable. The ship's too damaged." Sophia met his gaze. "We fight until we can't fight anymore. This is our stand. If the High Command won't back us, then we'll do it ourselves." Her resolve was absolute. There was no turning back now. The price of victory was steep, and it was about to get steeper. But Sophia Hartley would not allow humanity's last hope to slip through their fingers. Not when they had come this far. The silence that followed the conversation with High Command lingered in the air. Sophia could feel the weight of the crew's gaze upon her, the knowledge that their fates were tied to her decisions. The tension on the bridge was palpable. The Retribution was damaged, and without reinforcements, the crew had no choice but to press on, unprotected and vulnerable. They had no guarantees, only the hope that they could stand strong in the face of the Zinthuri's inevitable return. "Captain," Lieutenant Farley said, breaking the stillness, "I've just received the last of the engineering reports. We've lost 2 of the main engines, and the auxiliary systems are barely functional. It's a miracle we're even moving." Sophia nodded grimly. The ship's condition was worse than she had anticipated. The once feared warship, now little more than a shadow of its former self, was pushing the limits of its old systems. The AI, once a powerhouse in battle, had been running on outdated protocols. But it was still running, and that gave them a glimmer of hope. "Keep us in motion," she ordered, though the words tasted bitter on her tongue. "We don't stop. Not yet." Understood, Farley said, his fingers moving rapidly across the controls. We'll make do, Captain. We always do. Despite his reassuring words, Sophia could see the exhaustion in his eyes. He had been with her through too many battles, seen too many impossible situations, and yet he never wavered. But even he, the ever-reliable first officer, had limits. The crew worked tirelessly, patching up the ship's many systems and making small repairs where they could. But the reality of their situation was growing increasingly clear. They were stranded, alone, and with no backup on the way. They had to rely solely on their ingenuity and grit. The Zinthuri would regroup, and when they did, they would return with far greater force. As the hours passed, Sophia found herself standing at the viewports, staring out into the inky expanse of space. The wreckage of the Zinthuri fleet drifted behind them, a haunting reminder of the battle they had won. But the victory felt hollow, knowing that the danger was far from over. "Captain," Yates said from his console, his voice tight, "I'm picking up something. It's a distress signal. It's human, but it's not coming from the colonies." Sophia's pulse quickened. "Where is it coming from?" "It's coming from a derelict station on the edge of the system," Yates replied, eyes narrowing as he read the signal. "It's been inactive for years. No one's been out there in a long time. It's a relic." A relic. The word echoed in Sophia's mind. They had just fought with an ancient warship, a relic of humanity's past, and now another relic appeared. Was this a sign of hope, or another trap? She didn't know. But they had no choice but to investigate. "Plot a course," she said decisively. "We need to check it out. If there's anything of value there, anything we can use to turn the tide, we need to find it." Farley glanced over his shoulder, concern etched on his face. "Captain, we don't have the time or resources for this. We're barely functional as it is." "I know," she replied, her voice steady. "But we've got to take the chance. We're running out of options." As the Retribution slowly altered its course toward the derelict station, the crew worked in tense silence, their eyes glued to the fading remnants of the battle behind them. They knew that every second counted. They could feel the Zinthuri closing in, even though they hadn't yet appeared on the sensors. It was only a matter of time before their enemies regrouped, and when that happened, the Retribution, without backup, without reinforcements, would be all that stood between them and total annihilation. The station came into view after what felt like an eternity. The massive structure floated eerily in the emptiness, its once pristine surface marred by the ravages of time and neglect. The station's lights flickered weakly in the distance, barely visible through the creeping darkness of space. Sophia's eyes narrowed. The station was old, too old. It had no business still being here, abandoned in the far reaches of space. But something about it called to her, like an ancient echo that refused to fade. "Captain, I'm getting a strange reading from inside the station," Yates said, his voice now tinged with caution. "There's power still running, minimal, but enough to indicate some kind of operational systems. And there's a strong electromagnetic pulse coming from the central core. It's strange." "Strange how?" Sophia asked, moving closer to him. "It's like a transmission, but it's not one we can decode. It's old, too old, almost like it's from a different time altogether." Sophia's mind raced. Was this some kind of trap? Or was it possible that they had stumbled upon something that could turn the tide of their war with the Zinthuri? She couldn't afford to hesitate. Whatever it was their only lead. "We're going in," she said firmly. "Prepare the boarding party." As the crew scrambled to prepare for the unknown, Sophia's gaze returned to the station. There were answers hidden there. She was certain of it. But what they would find inside could be the key to their survival, or the beginning of a much darker chapter. The docking bay doors of the derelict station groaned open with an unsettling hiss, revealing a darkened interior. The faint hum of dormant machinery filled the air as Sophia and her team stepped off the Retribution and into the cold, abandoned corridors of the station. The once bustling facility was now a shadow of its former self, its walls covered in a thick layer of dust, its floors littered with the remnants of forgotten technology. Sophia could feel the weight of the silence press in on her. This place, abandoned long ago, had a history, one that felt long buried. Yet the faint electromagnetic pulse from the station's core still hummed, a reminder that someone might still be here. "Captain, be careful," Lieutenant Farley said, his voice low, his eyes scanning their surroundings. "We don't know what we're walking into. This place has been dead for years." Sophia nodded, her hand resting on the sidearm at her waist. "Stay sharp. We need answers, and whatever is here, we're taking it with us." The team moved through the narrow hallways, their footsteps echoing in the hollow emptiness. Every corner felt like it could hide something, an old security system, a trap left by whoever had once worked here, or something worse. The air was stale, thick with the scent of neglect, and the lights flickered above, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. They reached the central core chamber, its massive doors slightly ajar. An eerie blue light pulsed from within, barely visible through the crack. As Sophia and the crew stepped closer, the sensation of being watched swept over her, an unsettling feeling that grew stronger with each step. "Captain," Yates said from the back of the group, his voice tense, "I'm getting a reading. There's something alive down there. It's not just the station systems. Something is still active. Can you identify it?" Sophia asked, her voice steady but edged with curiosity. "It's hard to pinpoint. The signal is irregular, fragmented, almost as if it's being intentionally scrambled. But there's something human about it." A cold shiver ran down Sophia's spine. "Human? Are you sure?" "I'm not certain, Captain, but it's too structured to be random," Yates replied. The doors to the central core chamber slid open with a soft whir, revealing the heart of the station. In the center of the room stood an enormous cylindrical structure, its surface covered in strange markings that flickered with a faint, ghostly light. Wires and conduits snaked out from the base of the structure, spreading across the room like veins, intertwining with old, rusted machinery. The air felt thick with static. The electromagnetic pulse that had been detected earlier was stronger now, pulsating in sync with the faint light emanating from the core. "Do we approach?" Farley asked, his voice tight with caution. Sophia hesitated for a moment, feeling a strange pull toward the machine at the center. Whatever it was, it had been here for a long time. And yet it was still functioning, still alive in some twisted way. "Yes," she said, her voice resolute. "We need to know what this is." As they stepped closer, the strange humming noise grew louder, and the lights within the machine flickered to life. Then, with a jolt, a holographic interface sprang into existence before them, its shape forming out of thin air. A human figure appeared in the projection, its face obscured by static, but its presence undeniable. "Who are you?" Sophia asked, her voice carrying the weight of the question. The figure flickered, its voice crackling as it spoke, its words distorted but unmistakable. I am the last of the Vanguard." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. The Vanguard. It was a name from humanity's past, an ancient project, one long thought abandoned. The Vanguard were the first experimental warships humanity had built during the early stages of space exploration. They were designed for a time of war that never came. And after the project was deemed a failure, they were forgotten, erased from most records. "Vanguard," Sophia repeated, her mind racing. "But how are you here?" The Vanguard was supposed to be a failure. The figure's face shimmered again, static distorting its features. "Not a failure, a hidden truth. I was left behind to protect humanity." The words struck Sophia like a lightning bolt. The Vanguard had been abandoned, its remnants scattered in the dark reaches of space. This station, this relic, was a key to something bigger, something much more dangerous. The figure continued, its voice growing fainter. You must understand. The Zintheri. They know. Of us. They came because of what we became. Sophia felt a chill as the figure's image flickered once more, the message fragmented. But the warning was clear. Whoever, or whatever, had created the Vanguard had left behind something of great importance, something that could change the tide of the war. "We need to get out of here," Farley said, his voice tinged with urgency. "This place is unstable, Captain." But it was too late. Suddenly, the station's lights flickered violently, and the hum of the core grew louder. The structure trembled, sending a vibration through the floor. Then, from the walls, strange tendrils of energy shot out, curling toward the team like tendrils of a great beast awakening from its long slumber. The station was coming alive, and whatever it had been hiding was now ready to make itself known. The station's rumblings grew louder, the once dormant structure now alive with violent energy. The strange tendrils of power crackled through the air, twisting like living entities, their electric pulses painting the walls in harsh, erratic light. Sophia could feel the tension in her bones, the rising panic in the pit of her stomach. Whatever this station was hiding, it was no longer just a forgotten relic. It was waking up. And with it, a force that humanity might not be able to control. "Get to the exit," Sophia shouted, her voice slicing through the chaos. Farley reacted immediately, pulling the team back toward the door, but the station was shifting, its pathways closing off as if it had a mind of its own. The walls groaned, bending in unnatural ways. The electromagnetic pulses intensified, warping the air around them. Static crackled from every corner, and the faint blue glow from the core now illuminated everything with a sickly, pulsating light. The crew sprinted through the corridors, but the further they moved, the more the station seemed to warp. Their surroundings became disorienting, walls stretching and shifting as though the very fabric of reality was being altered. Sophia's thoughts raced. There was no time to wonder how or why. They needed to escape, and fast. "Captain, we need to find the main power source," Yates yelled, his voice strained. "It's the only way we can shut this down before it becomes a full-blown catastrophe." Sophia nodded, her instincts kicking in. "Where is it?" Yates quickly scanned his console, his fingers flying over the touchpad. "The power source is in the lower levels. If we can get there, we can overload the system and bring it down. But it'll be a gamble. The core's readings are unstable." "Then we take that gamble," Sophia said firmly. "Farley, lead the way." Farley took the lead, pushing forward through the twisting maze of the station's corridors, the walls and ceiling now throbbing with intense energy. It felt as though the station itself was alive, its pulse in sync with the beat of a darker heart. Every step they took seemed to take them deeper into the heart of something ancient, something dangerous. And the further they ventured, the stronger the force became. As they reached a large open chamber, Sophia's eyes widened. In the center stood a massive metallic structure, twisted, dark, and almost otherworldly in appearance. It was a hybrid of technology and something else, something organic. The lines of metal and glowing energy were intertwined, almost as if the station's core was fused with something else, something alien. The sensation of power in the air was overwhelming. "This is it," Yates said, voice barely above a whisper. "We can't stop it unless we get to that core." But before they could move, the ground beneath them trembled violently. The walls groaned and cracked, and a deep, rumbling sound echoed from below. Sophia's heart raced. The core was reacting to their presence, its systems fighting back against their approach. It was as if the station was aware of their intention, and it would do everything in its power to stop them from shutting it down. Suddenly, the air around them grew thick, and a series of glowing energy beams shot from the central structure, locking down the chamber. The entire room was surrounded by an impenetrable barrier of light, trapping them inside. Farley cursed under his breath. "We're not getting out that way." "Focus," Sophia barked. "We don't have time for this." She drew her sidearm and began firing at the glowing energy, but the shots ricocheted off harmlessly. Yates quickly adjusted his console, trying to find a way to hack into the station's systems and disable the barrier. But the interference was too strong. The power fluctuations were scrambling everything. "Captain," Yates said, his voice strained, "it's no use. This system is beyond anything we've encountered. I can't override it." Sophia's mind raced. They were trapped. There had to be another way. Her eyes scanned the room, focusing on the dark, twisted structure at the center. The core wasn't just a power source. It was a beacon, a key to something far greater. But what? And then it hit her. The Vanguard. The message. The Syntheri. They know. They've been hunting it. She muttered under her breath. The Vanguard isn't just a weapon. It's the key to a larger war. Suddenly, the holographic figure of the Vanguard flickered back into existence, its static-filled form standing tall before them. Its voice rasped as if it were speaking from the depths of a dying machine. You must stop it," the figure warned, its tone growing weaker. "The Syntheri. They are coming. This station is a trap. It was always a trap." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. A trap. The figure's image shimmered, the transmission flickering in and out of focus. It was designed to be the last line of defense. But now, it is a weapon of destruction. The Syntheri will find you. You must. The message cut off abruptly. The core surged with power, and the chamber exploded in a blinding flash of light. For a moment, Sophia couldn't see anything, just a flash of white-hot energy. When the light faded, they found themselves standing at the edge of a new nightmare. In the distance, the stars outside the station were now blocked by a massive fleet of Syntheri ships, descending like a dark storm. The Vanguard's warning had been clear. The Syntheri knew, and they were coming.